thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I want to thank Microsol for inviting me to share this information with you. We think this is a really important study and tool for the industry. And it does fall into our larger set of smart market reports and briefs. As Annalisa mentioned, I am the managing editor of those, and they cover a wide range of topics that we think are transformative in the construction industry, and each one features new research on these topics. But in this particular one I'm going to talk about is part of a larger research project that we've actually been working on now for over 5 years. And I want to present everything to you across it. So we had one consistent finding across all of our studies, which is that collaboration and integration across the project team improves outcomes. Now, definitely that includes collaboration between the architect and the contractor. That's in some ways the heart of it. But having the owner and considering the owner as a member and a collaborative member of that project team is also critical. And the project guide that I'm going to talk to you about is intended to be a tool to encourage collaboration between owners, design teams, and contractors to get the entire group together early on and really deal with risk on a project. And this all came out of a project we started many years ago in partnership with a wide group of industry organizations, from the AIA Large Firm Roundtable to the American Institute of Architects to AGC, DBIA, LCI, Autodesk, and Graphisoft. We all came together and we wanted to look at what creates uncertainty in the construction industry, in building projects. And we focused on large, complex projects because that's where issues with uncertainty are most widely felt. But in fact, uncertainty does plague a lot of construction projects. You don't have to be a big, massive project like the one we have on the cover of the report, which is, of course, the replacement building for the World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower, and that whole area. But we really felt like we wanted to answer the question of how can we do a better job of identifying and managing the causes of uncertainty that negatively impact everyone's performance. And this was a large, complex research process. First, we wanted to pin exactly what are the typical causes of uncertainty that everyone feels. And for that, we used that survey of almost 3,000 architects, contractors, and owners. We then went and used that data to do a tighter survey of architects and contractors and owners that forms the basis of the report. But when we point to those causes of uncertainty, those come from a very large industry survey. And one of the things that we found out is that we really do not agree on what satisfactory performance consists of on projects. So we looked at the frequency of satisfactory performance of the quality of a project, the cost, and the schedule. We have the architect and contractor responses, and we compare those to what the owner thinks is a satisfactory performance on these criteria. So first, let's go to quality. And we could see that architects and contractors are pretty optimistic about the quality of their projects. 49% believe that their clients are always satisfied with their quality performance, and another 49% say that they're frequently satisfied. However, only 20% of owners report that they are always satisfied on quality performance. And if you can if you combine the blue and the orange wedges together on these pies, you can see that significantly fewer owners are even fall into the always and frequently category. When we look at cost performance, we see an even more striking gap between what the architects and contractors think, where you can see 31% think that the owners are always satisfied with their performance versus just 11% of performance who are always satisfied on cost performance. And again, the orange and blue wedges added together add up to a lot less on the owner side than they do on the architect and contractor side. Same thing with schedule. You see the exact same pattern. If you look at those orange and blue wedges, you go from 36% of architects and contractors who think that their clients are always satisfied with schedule versus just 12% of owners who report that. So, and you get a pretty high percentage, 10%, who say they're infrequently or never satisfied with schedule performance. So you can see there's a real differential of perspective on performance in the industry. And how can it be that there's that much of a disconnect? Well, one of the ways we can answer that is by looking at how should performance be measured. We asked owners, architects, and contractors how one should measure the performance of the design team. Interestingly, though, for the most part, there is some agreement on the order of the top three. So everyone agrees that the number one way to measure performance on the design team is that they've actually developed documents that meet the requirements of the owner's program and are constructible within a budget. No surprise there. That's kind of the fundamental description from an owner's point of view of what they should be doing. But look what rates a very close second, and a very close second among owners, architects, and contractors in terms of how to judge the performance of a design team. It's the ability to solve issues working with team members and not escalating to the owners. And you can see for construction teams that that characteristic, that ability to solve issues by working with the team collaboratively, is more important even than looking at construction errors or number of change orders on projects. It's these, for both the design team and the construction team, 78% of owners, in fact, say that this is the top way that performance should be measured. So what most effectively reduces uncertainty on projects? When we look at how things are ranked, certainly having detailed drawings with no significant errors or omissions is number one. And there's no surprise about that. But we also know realistically out there in the industry right now, very few design teams are given enough time to really always guarantee that there are no significant errors or omissions. And I think that the industry recognized this when they did this survey as well, because nearly as many who said that the detailed construction drawings with no significant errors or emissions was important as a factor to reduce overall uncertainty, nearly as many said a collaborative approach across the entire design team that starts in early design, and that's a key factor, that it starts in early design, is critical to reduce uncertainty. And related to that as well is clear process for project team members for dealing with issues. Not only do you have to collaborate, you have to know how you can best collaborate. So let's do a deeper dive on what we found. So first, remember I mentioned we had that big initial survey and we determined the causes of uncertainty that are most commonly impacting projects. It was the 7 that you see listed at the top of this slide: owner-driven changes, accelerated schedules, design errors and omissions, construction coordination issues, contractor-caused delays, and unforeseen conditions. These are consistently across the board reported as the factors that most frequently influence cost, quality, and schedule. So we then looked at some ways to actually address these, and we scored each one, and we created a score based on an overall score based on effectiveness across the board, effectiveness reported by owners, architects, and contractors. Number one, the most effective method for addressing all of these issues is better communication among all the project team members in the early stages of the project. You can see how high it's ranked across the board, and it's not just this study that reveals this. We also did a study of owners with the Lean Construction Institute, in which we asked the owners to examine their best project that they've done in the last few years, and then a typical project that they've done in the past few years. Now, this wasn't just, sort of what we think should be best and what we think is typical. We asked them to think of specific projects and describe their experiences with specific projects, one they would consider the best one they've done and one that they've consider a very typical one based on performance that they always see. And the blue line on this chart represents the responses for the best projects, and the orange line represents the responses for the typical projects. You can see that when we asked the owners, when did you engage your teams on each of these two projects, that 76% of the owners engaged the teams on the best projects before or during conceptualization. And when we talked about key stakeholders, who's in that team, we were very explicit on this research. We said we wanted to know when they engaged the architect, the contractor, and the key trades. So we're really, this really is the true project team. And on the best projects, they are typically brought in before design. You can see on typical projects that is not the case. Almost half don't engage the key stakeholders until design development or later. So again, and that isn't the only research we've done where that point comes through, but I think it comes through really tellingly there in terms of owners' experiences on their projects. So the second most important factor for dealing with all of these causes of uncertainty is having greater leadership or involvement by the owner in all stages of design and construction. And in some ways, it's this one that is truly at the heart of this particular presentation, because when we get to the owner guide, it was designed to help encourage greater leadership on the part of the owner by helping the project team, get the owner more actively engaged and understanding a project in the beginning. So remember this one when we move on to the owner guide. Use of a team-based alternative to design, bid, build. You can see that this is really critical to address accelerated schedules and design errors and omissions. And this, again, has to do with getting the team on early, right? The biggest problem with design, bid, build is that it tends to push the involvement of the team until later in the project. Using more collaborative approaches and approaches that build a team much earlier have a huge impact. And obviously, that's very important for how the owner gets engaged in a project. Appropriate contingency dedicated to this issue by the owner is, again, particularly important to deal with owner-driven changes, accelerated schedules, design errors, and unforeseen conditions. The use of BIM also scored pretty highly, especially for dealing with design errors and construction coordination issues, but also with accelerated schedules and design omissions. And I really do want to pause on this one a little bit. We've seen, again, a lot of data supporting why BIM shows up so highly here. It's not about it being a design tool, okay? And we did some research with Autodesk that resulted in 3 reports. Again, all 3 of these are available on construction.com for free download if you are interested. The main takeaway of them, though, all 3 together, is to stop thinking of BIM as something your company does and start thinking of it as driving integrated digital workflows on projects. So really, it's not that your company is particularly good at BIM. It's the way in which BIM allows you to connect the entire team together. So again, the use of BIM goes back to that collaborative piece, that silos of excellence are not what's sought. What's sought is getting everyone together, understanding the project, and working together in an environment that encourages it. So that's why we see BIM performing so strongly on this. We also see the idea of shared liability across the project team. Again, this goes back to possibly looking at your delivery methods. It can just go to the team's approach. Obviously IPD helps with this. And then finally, we see the use of lean design and construction practices. Now, I must confess, the performance here is a little bit low. We did do this survey about 6 years ago, and we've certainly seen a pickup in terms of those who know about and understand lean between then and now. So I suspect if we perform this survey now, we'd see a lot higher performance because, again, we see that lean practices contribute toward that collaborative approach. Again, going back to that same study I talked about earlier that we did with the Lean Construction Institute, where we had owners rate things on their best and typical projects, towards the end of that survey, we just gave them a long list, about 32, 33 items, and said, which of these did you use on your best project? Same list again. Which of these did you use on your typical projects? Just that simple. Then when we were doing the analysis, we looked for the methods that were far more associated with best projects than with typical projects. And where the biggest gaps are the things that we think we can point to as best practices to get typical projects to perform more like best projects. And you can see the top one, the biggest gap, is co-location big room, getting everyone together, getting them collaborating by putting them in the same space. It tends to be very effective. Some of the other ones include full team onboarding and target value design and last planner system, all of which encourage collaboration. And in that same study, we also see the payoff when it comes to team dynamics. You can see that best projects, we had them rate the team dynamics of the typical and the best project on a scale of 1 to 4. Specifically, team chemistry, the integration of team members, the commitment of team members to the same project goals, and the timeliness of decision-making related to the issue resolution. For each of these categories, we had them rated on a scale from 1 to 4. 1 and 2 were not very good. 3 was good performance, and 4 was excellent. So the team chemistry was outstanding. The integration was complete, that kind of thing. You can see that when it comes to those who give a 4 rating, 4s are common, especially for team chemistry and integration of project team members on best projects, and almost non-existent on typical projects. We, in fact, consider in some ways team dynamics to be one of the key performance indicators that suggest how well a project is going to do in terms of garnering owner satisfaction, and in a later study we did with LCI, and determining the satisfaction that architects have with their own projects, not the way they're judged by the owner, but the way the firm themselves feels about them in terms of their ability to meet what the client's looking for, in terms of their satisfaction, in terms of the creativity and what they're able to design, meeting their own standards. Again, we see these collaborative methods contributing to all of that. So we did this research project. We demonstrated the value of collaboration. We demonstrated that there's a gap in understanding right now that has to be overcome in the industry. So then the next question was, all right, we've got these great findings. They reveal the problems. They kind of start pointing us in the direction of how to solve them. But what can we do to really help project teams apply those learnings and truly improve the project process and performance for everyone? And part of that, the first phase of really trying to address that question was the development of the project planning guide for owners and project teams. And, I tend to refer to it shorthand as the owner planning guide, but in fact, that is almost the wrong way to think of it. It is intended as a tool for owners. We hope owners find it. We hope they use it. But we really think the true value lies not with owners using this, but with design teams in particular, and construction teams are involved in the beginning of a project, to begin to have an adult conversation with their clients about managing project risk. One that doesn't assume at the beginning of the project, the way the construction industry tends to over and over again, that nothing is going to go wrong on this one. We're not going to deal with all those factors. Nothing's going to happen bad. This is going to be the perfect project. Instead, it's better to fully acknowledge the risk going in, bring the owner in, inform them, because as a lot of you on the call already know, some of your clients are very experienced and really understand what it means to build something. Many of them, on the other hand, are not. Many of them do not do construction on a regular basis. So this tool is designed to speak to both levels of owners, to really be able to bring both, not just those who are well-informed, into a conversation that can help set expectations right from the start of the project and build a realistic project budget, a realistic project contingency, and schedule around what it truly is going to take to build the project. The first 2 sections, you can see we have the contents of the entire report here, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through those. And yet again, I'm sorry, but I have to do one more plug. This is also available for free download at construction.com. So you can either go to the resources section, you can put in /toolkit/reports to access it, but please know that this tool is definitely easily available to you as soon as you get off of this meeting. So the first 2 sections, though, the challenge and sources of uncertainty, those are really intended to set the stage, and everything I've just told you is what's covered in there. That basically summarizes what we learned on the report we just did. So I want to dive in to the recommendation section to give you a little bit more thorough understanding of what it involves. And so we came up with a series of recommendations from owners, designers, and builders on what really an owner can do to make their projects better. And so, this is a good thing to actually start conversations with your owners. The first one is provide strong and consistent leadership within the owner's organization. Sounds great, right? But, how can they actually do this? So in each of these sections, we have a longer summary of exactly what's involved, but we also created a short bulleted list that you can really just target and have your owners thinking about and when they're trying to set up their projects in the very beginning. The first one is to identify a single project leader, to keep senior executives engaged. One of the biggest problems is that a construction project is a living thing, right? It changes. It's constantly evolving. And if the senior executives on the owner's side are only engaged at the very beginning and then drift away, things are going to happen and they could create obstacles down the road because they haven't kept up with how the project is changing and evolving. And you'll see this return to again and again in these recommendations in different forms, setting up exactly which partner does which, how communication is going to occur, doing all that. And then the first step is, of course, being clear about team responsibilities. So that's the first set of recommendations. The second recommendation has to do with putting the project team together correctly and choosing a project delivery method that enhances collaboration. I think my whole session so far has demonstrated why that's important. So engaging construction partners early in the process, again, that goes to collaboration, and being clear about team responsibilities is also crucial. Again, going back to, setting up everything so that everyone knows exactly how they're going to be contributing and the owner understands it too. And then selecting team members based on qualification and experience. We actually just completed a study with the AIA on qualifications-based selection. We included both public and private owners in this study, and it became very clear that qualifications-based selection really helps projects improve if they face any challenges. They deliver better quality projects in general, and they tend to be a better experience for the owner. There was an expectation that ones where cost is a bigger factor in the team selection might actually perform better on cost. For the most part, cost performance was a wash in that study. Neither one was better. And yet, for the same cost, you got higher quality, better experience, better ability to deal with problems. So there really was a compelling argument about qualifications and experience. So, that point has been reinforced by research we've done after we created the Owner's Guide. All right. The third recommendation that came from the owners and designers and builders is to establish and maintain strong communication within the project team. Having a senior executive as a project sponsor is critical. Creating a council of principals is critical. Soliciting regular feedback from owner stakeholders. I think a lot of people on the call will recognize that this is a key part. Keeping the stakeholders engaged from the beginning and throughout the process so that their feedback doesn't just come at the end and blow everything up, or doesn't just come at the beginning and then they see what they get and they don't understand how it got to this point. And then investing time in aligning the team, understanding that it actually is an important part of project success to align the team. Okay, number 4, though, is where I think that the architect team in particular can really step in. If I was looking at this guide and wanted to guide a client, this is really where I think having the team reviewing the guide with their clients, this is really where their input can come into play. And it's really that first bullet, defining the owner's goals, needs, priorities, and success criteria. As I've already mentioned, if you have an experienced owner who understands construction and has done a lot of projects, probably that's just a quick conversation. But if you have an owner who does not deal a great deal with construction, getting them to really working with them, guiding them, helping them determine what their goals, needs, priorities, and success criteria are, sets up the project for success. I think that is a key one for the design team to dive in and help with. In addition to that, developing a detailed project program of functional requirements and relationships is also important, and identifying those areas of uncertainty and possible change. We have a specific tool that will help with that I'm going to get to in a second. So that's another one where the team, the project team, can really help guide the owner and use this report and what it contains as a foundation for that. All right, so our next recommendation is taking advantage of the best proven technologies and design methods. And really, right now, when it comes to encouraging collaboration, when it comes to setting up the project, you'll see there's a lot of mention of BIM. And that is, again, because we see BIM not as just a technology, but as a real tool for creating that integration between all of the members of the project team. And in fact, integrated BIM on a study not conducted by us on the future of construction really showed the most promise as being the most likely and having the highest impact in terms of all of the new technologies that they rated on that study. All right, so those are the top recommendations for the owners, right? But, there's only so much you can do to preach to the owner. How can you actually have a conversation with the owner? And really, these two sections on managing uncertainty and the contingency calculator in particular are really critical. So the contingency calculator is a tool that you can present to the owner as a way for them to plan for the known unknowns. Because as you know, there's a lot of uncertainty. That green wedge throughout that chart, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of expectations about the project, which are that baseline. There's a big cone of uncertainty that narrows and narrows and narrows as the project goes along about how project cost is going to behave. So there's a wide range of things that could increase or decrease cost when you're still in the early planning stages. They decrease as you go through planning. They're still pretty wide when you start construction. And of course, by the time you complete the project, you know exactly where you stand. Because of this, it is considered standard good practice for owners to have a contingency. And you would think that, especially experienced owners, that they would have a standard way of doing a risk assessment that determines what level of contingency they need. Based on their previous experience on projects, they could come up with a good way to calculate the appropriate level of contingency. But less than 1/4 of the owners that we surveyed for this study said that they actually have a process like that in place. And, again, that's something that you would expect of experienced owners. For inexperienced owners, it's nearly impossible. And this tool, this contingency calculator, comes in to help with that. It looks at the different things that really can impact project cost, including program complexity, the changes that they themselves make into the program, existing site and building conditions, imperfections in the design, and it's interesting. One fact that I didn't present from the previous study is that's in the study that this is all based on, is that owners know that design is not going to be perfect, but most of them expect design to be perfect. It's an interesting contrast there. So really, owners do understand that design imperfection is something that is just in the nature of such a complex process. Construction coordination issues are another thing that can add to cost and impact cost, permitting and regulatory changes, and construction and price variations. So these are the main factors that really influence cost on a lot of different projects. And we've created a simple tool, but the tool is only as effective as the conversation it engages amongst the design teams. This, to me, is the heart of the value of the owner guide, is being able to bring the design team, the construction team, and the owner together, really look at each of these categories, for every project. Look at the different uncertainty factors that we just looked at, and then say, okay, what do we think is the potential for change based on a percentage of the overall cost of the project? It's based on scope and complexity. And this particular project, there was an estimation that, we could see cost increasing by up to 15% or decreasing by by up to 10% based on how scope and complexity changes. And there is no standard for this, right? This potential change, this is a conversation determining what these percentages need to be for each of these categories, for design imperfections, and how much influence they could have on the budget, for construction price variances, and how much influence they could have on the budget. Each of these needs to have a conversation amongst all the team members to determine to what degree overall they think that these potential for change could happen. And then combine that with the probability that these are likely to happen. So you might have an owner who knows that they've got a tricky group of stakeholders who are going to constantly be looking for new things throughout the process, right? Then you might want to increase the probability that cost is going to increase due to project scope and complexity or to owner and user changes above the 25% or 30% that's offered in this model. On the other hand, you could know that you have a very tight owner team and that it's unlikely to change and that they don't really have to take a lot of input from around their organization. That could reduce the owner-user change percentages of probability. So again, it's not about there being some kind of standard, wonderful, fixed thing out there in the industry. It's about just being able to fill in what you think these probabilities should be by having this conversation across with your owners and, having it across the team. And that lands up with the total contingency contribution for each of these factors. And then what's really nice is, obviously the need for a contingency changes across the scope of the project, right? Between schematic design and when construction is complete to 1-year occupancy. Some of these things, once construction starts, they've had very low likelihood that they're going to change, that you're not going to know exactly what they cost at this point. Other things, they could extend, again, it's like design imperfection could extend right into that first-year occupancy. Something might not appear until people are actually interacting with the building. So filling these out, going through them with the owner again, having the owner understand the degree to which risk goes down. But what's exciting about this and what you can offer to the owner as a great thing about this is that this also releases contingency, right? We start out with a pretty high contingency here. And you can see by the time you get to even 75% complete construction, it goes from 14 million to just 4 million. Left, or about 5 million, left in what it still needs to be left in the contingency pool. So the contingency pool can be fed back into the project. It can be a bonus in terms of, getting a project in actually under budget. It can be used as a motivator. This whole tool can then be used as something to motivate, say, the construction team that they can get bonuses if certain of these things stay below the contingency. There's a lot of things you can do with this tool, but the key fundamental part of it is that it's just really just a simple spreadsheet tool. What it does is it supports that conversation between the design construction teams and the owner. And, the report does include a quick checklist of top items, but that really covers exactly how we think and why we think it's so important that architects in particular and contractors understand that this tool is not really is geared towards the owners, but it's intended to be something that's used by the project team with their owners.